The clash at the Jade Palace had ended. Silence hung in the air like the aftermath of a storm. Tai Lung, bruised, beaten, and stripped of all arrogance, lay at the feet of the panda, Po, the dragon warrior. His breath was ragged, pride shattered, body aching from defeat. And he believed this was the end, the moment Po would perform the wuxi finger hold and cast him into the spirit realm. But it never came. Instead, Po looked down at him, not with rage, not with vengeance, but with compassion. "You don't have to keep fighting," he said softly. "You've already lost, not just the battle, but everything you were chasing." Tai Lung stared at him, expecting the flick of the pinky, but Po stepped back and said, "Go." Tai Lung didn't wait to question it. Fear, shame, and confusion drove him from the palace. He ran, not out of gratitude, but because he didn't know what else to do. Weeks passed, then months. China was vast and unforgiving. Tai Lung became a nameless shadow, wandering from town to town. The stories of his terror still followed him, but few knew what had become of him. Some thought he had died. Others thought he had vanished into myth. But the truth was simpler. Tai Lung was lost. He fought when he had to. Bandits, bounty hunters, even corrupt officials. Not out of heroism, but survival. He slept in forests and ate what he could steal or scavenge. He avoided villages, not because he feared them, but because he didn't want to see the faces of those who had heard of his disgrace. But more painful than hunger or wounds was the emptiness inside. For so long, his identity had been defined by the pursuit of the Dragon Scroll. The idea that he was destined for greatness, that he was the chosen one. Now he had to accept that he wasn't. That a clumsy panda had beaten him, not with brute force, but with inner peace. Tai Lung hated that truth. He hated Po for it. But most of all, he hated himself. He blamed Shifu for raising him on hollow dreams. He cursed the heavens for mocking his ambition. But the truth echoed louder every day. He had become his own downfall. It happened in a dusty roadside village. He entered a broken-down restaurant, its wooden walls barely standing, its owner too old to care about customers. Tai Lung sat in the corner and quietly ordered a bowl of rice and tofu. He had stolen a few coins from a corrupt tax collector a few towns over. It felt justified. Just as he lifted the bowl to his lips, a small paw snatched one of the dumplings from his plate. He turned swiftly, grabbing the thief by the scruff of the neck. It was a child, a small girl, no older than 8. Her fur was light gray, with a silvery white underbelly. A corsac fox, he realized. Her eyes were large, amber, and defiant. "Let go! I'm hungry!" she snapped, wriggling in his grip. He could have tossed her aside, could have scared her off. But something in those eyes, something familiar, made him stop. He lowered her gently to the ground. "Stealing from someone like me isn't a good idea," he muttered, his voice cold but not cruel. The girl stared at him. "You didn't kill me. That's new. Don't push your luck." She bolted out of the restaurant. Tai Lung returned to his meal, trying to forget the encounter. But the image of the girl lingered in his mind. The next day, she was there again, and the day after that. Wherever Tai Lung went, she followed, quiet at first, watching from rooftops or alleyways. Eventually, she grew bolder, walking a few paces behind him on the road, humming to herself, pretending she wasn't following him. Tai Lung confronted her at least 5 times. "Go away," he'd growl. "Find your own path." She never listened. "I already did," she'd reply with a shrug. "It's yours." He learned her name, Zheu, orphaned young, survived by pickpocketing and charm. She had no family, no home, no reason to trust anyone, and yet she followed the most dangerous warrior in China without fear. Zheu was annoying, relentless, stubborn, but over time, Tai Lung stopped trying to push her away. Once, when he was wounded from a bandit ambush, she patched him up with herbs she'd stolen from a nearby healer. Another time, she stole fresh bread from a guarded cart and shared it with him, grinning like it was the proudest moment of her life. "You're good at stealing," he admitted one evening. "Thanks, you're good at breaking people's bones." He smirked. Days turned to weeks. The two wandered together like ghosts of the past. He never said it, but Tai Lung began to appreciate the company. She asked questions, told stories, even tried copying his kung fu moves when she thought he wasn't looking. Zheu reminded him of something he had long forgotten, what it felt like to be seen as something more than a weapon. She didn't know him as the monster from the Valley of Peace. To her, he was just a grumpy warrior with a broken past, and a heart he refused to admit he had. One night, as they sat by a small campfire, Tai Lung looked at the stars. Zheu lay nearby, curled up in a blanket she had swiped from a traveling merchant. "Why me?" he asked softly. "Huh?" she mumbled sleepily. "Why follow me? You knew I was dangerous. You could have found someone better." Zheu yawned. "Maybe, but you didn't hurt me. That was enough." Tai Lung looked at her, confused. "That's it," she nodded. "You didn't act like a monster, so I knew you weren't one." He turned back to the fire. Her words sat heavy in his chest. For the first time in years, Tai Lung didn't feel like a villain. He felt like something else. The road ahead was still uncertain. Tai Lung didn't know what redemption looked like. He didn't know if he even deserved it. But with Zheu at his side, something began to stir in him. Not vengeance, not anger, but a quiet question. Could he change? Maybe he didn't have to walk this path alone anymore. Maybe, just maybe, mercy had given him more than a second chance. It had given him a reason to keep going. Confront his past once more as old enemies rise, and Zheu begins to learn the truth of the warrior she follows. The path beyond the village curled up the edge of a tall mountain range, steep and cold, but alive. Tai Lung and Zheu walked in silence, the air thin and windswept. Snow rested lightly on rooftops, and villagers in heavy robes moved slowly, carrying goods to and from shops carved into the mountainside. The town was modest, carved more from survival than ambition. To Zheu, it looked peaceful. To Tai Lung, it was another place to pass through. They found shelter in an old yet quiet tea house. Zheu, the young corsac fox girl, sat near the window, sipping warm tea she had managed to barter for with a small jade trinket she found in the last town. Her white and gray fur blended well with the snowy backdrop, but her emerald eyes remained sharp. Tai Lung sat across from her, arms crossed, silent as always. He didn't notice it at first, the tension in the air, the way every metal pot, knife, and tool was kept hidden under the floorboards or tucked away behind curtains. But Zheu noticed. She always noticed. The attack came at dusk. Howls echoed through the peaks before figures emerged from the shadows, gray wolves, armorless but terrifyingly coordinated. They didn't go for coin purses or food sacks. Instead, they smashed through workshops, dug into storerooms, and raided smithies. They only took metal. Zheu pulled at Tai Lung's arm. "They're not just looters. They're after something. Tools, weapons, anything made of steel. That's weird, right?" Tai Lung shrugged her off. "It's not our fight." "But we always fight," Zheu snapped. "We fight to survive, to eat, to sleep somewhere warm. These people might actually give us something if we help, or at least not throw us out." He paused. The kid had a point. More than that, he didn't hate the idea, and that irritated him more than anything. "Fine," he growled, "but I'm doing it my way." The night was lit with fire and fury. Tai Lung didn't wait for a plan or orders. He stormed into the village square like a thunderclap splitting the mountain. The wolves turned toward him, snarling with jagged teeth and rusty blades. But Tai Lung didn't falter. He breathed once, deeply, and then became a storm. One wolf charged, swinging a serrated sword. Tai Lung stepped aside like flowing water and struck with the speed of lightning. A brutal palm thrust cracked ribs and sent the attacker flying backward into a cart, wood and metal shattering around him. Another wolf lunged with twin daggers. Tai Lung parried one blade, twisted the arm, and launched the attacker into the air with a spinning kick. Before the body hit the ground, Tai Lung was already moving. A third, fourth, and fifth wolf surrounded him, flanking him like predators. One leapt with claws outstretched. Tai Lung caught him midair and used him like a battering ram, smashing him into the others. They collapsed like dominoes. The sixth attacker wielded a staff. He jabbed forward rapidly, but Tai Lung, with impossible grace, bent backward, cartwheeled, and grabbed the staff. With a yank, he disarmed his foe and shattered the staff over his knee. Then he flipped forward and struck with a double fist to the ground, sending a shockwave that knocked two wolves completely off their feet. The wolves began to panic. Tai Lung roared, not from anger, but from power. "Is that all you've got?" Three wolves charged together, howling in unity. Tai Lung launched into the air, spinning with a corkscrew motion, and came down like a falling boulder. The ground cracked beneath his impact, and the wolves were thrown back like leaves in a hurricane. Zheu watched from the rooftops, her green eyes wide. Tai Lung was a one-man army, fluid, ferocious, and elegant. Each move told the story of a warrior forged in the fires of discipline and obsession. His power was not wild, it was pure. Villagers peeked from doorways, jaws slack, watching the demon cat dismantle their enemies with nothing but muscle and mastery. As Tai Lung battled, Zheu worked in the shadows. She helped elders board up homes, ushered children into safe corners, and even picked up a frying pan to smack a wolf across the snout when one got too close. She wasn't as strong, but she was fast and clever, and she fought with heart. The wolves began to retreat. Their numbers had thinned, their spirits had broken. They were not prepared for a warrior like Tai Lung. Retreat came the bark of a new voice. Tai Lung turned to see him, a larger wolf, more muscle than fur, wielding a massive black iron hammer. He barked commands at his crew, forcing them to grab whatever metal they could and flee. But Tai Lung saw something else. A symbol burned into the wolf's shoulder. A rising flame curled in a circle. Something old stirred in Tai Lung's chest. A memory, a sound, screams. He saw it. His childhood, flames licking the walls of the temple. His parents, gone. Not just gone, slain. And behind it, a shadow of feathers. A bird. His eyes widened. Time froze. The battlefield fell away, replaced by the burning vision of that fateful day. Crack! The hammer hit home. Tai Lung was launched backward, crashing through a merchant's stall, smashing into wood and snow. Zheu screamed his name, running to his side, but he didn't speak. He lay on the ground, eyes wide open, but lost in a world no one else could see. Zheu knelt beside him. Tai Lung, get up! What happened? You almost had him. But Tai Lung said nothing. He sat upright slowly, clutching his ribs but showing no emotion. He didn't even wince. The wolves were gone, disappearing into the snowy trails with sacks of metal and their wounded boss. Zheu shook him. Say something! I saw something, he muttered at last, eyes locked on the flames still flickering in the distance. From my past, I saw them. She stared. Who? He didn't answer. They sat in silence, the cold returning to the mountain. The next day, the villagers thanked them quietly. They offered warm bread, a place to sleep, even spare coins, but Tai Lung barely touched the food. He stared into the horizon, fists clenched. The morning sun barely pierced through the clouds as Tai Lung crouched by a stream, washing the blood from his fists. His reflection shimmered, warped by the current. Scars danced across his knuckles, some fresh, others old. He stared at them like they were strangers. Zheu approached quietly, her ears flicking as she padded over the dew-covered grass. Her voice was soft but steady. We're going after those wolves, aren't we? Tai Lung didn't look up. We are. She hesitated. Why? I mean, we already scared them off, didn't we? Why go looking for trouble? He didn't answer right away. Water trickled past his hands, stained faintly pink. I need to, he finally muttered, as if the words weighed too much to say any louder. Zheu didn't press further. She knew that look in his eyes, the storm building just behind them. She'd seen it often enough to know that trying to calm it only fed it. So she simply nodded and sat beside him in silence, letting the wind speak where words could not. Their journey stretched across 2 days, winding through narrow paths, wide open fields, and broken trails where the scent of scorched metal still lingered in the soil. They stopped in small villages, spoke to wary farmers, passing merchants, even a traveling blacksmith. Zheu took the lead in conversation, her big ears, curious eyes, and disarming smile doing what Tai Lung's presence could not. Everyone had heard something. Whispers of raiders, all with wolf insignias. Rumors of iron shipments hijacked, carts stripped bare. The most consistent tale came from a bent old man who claimed he'd once seen one of the wolves dropping crates into a hidden valley where fire flickered even at night and the air smelled of coal. Someone's building a weapon, Zheu summarized, frowning as they left the last village. Something unnatural. Many scoffed at the idea, waving it off as fantasy or fear-mongering. But not Tai Lung. He remained quiet, though Zheu noticed the way his jaw clenched, his fists curled tighter at every mention. It meant something to him. Their travels brought them to a valley bathed in golden sun and lined with glimmering rice paddies. Cranes flew overhead, and distant oxen pulled carts along a road winding toward the east. But neither of them admired the view. Tai Lung was already deep into his routine, kicks slicing through the air, his body a blur of precision and restrained fury. Zheu trained too, though hers was less violent and more exploratory. She mimicked his forms imperfectly, fumbling sometimes, giggling when she fell. She never asked him to help her. He never offered. But every now and then, she'd catch his eye subtly correcting her stance. That night, beside their campfire, she finally asked, "Is this about more than just the wolves?" Tailong didn't respond at first. The flames danced in his pale eyes. "I thought I was done with war," he said at last. "But some monsters don't die unless you hunt them yourself." Po swallowed hard. She didn't know what haunted him exactly, what face he saw in the shadows, but she knew it was pulling him into something bigger than either of them. They arrived at the river the next afternoon, a vast silver ribbon winding endlessly across the countryside. The only way across was by boat, but they had no coin left to speak of. Tai Lung stared at the water, brows furrowed. "We take one," he said, eyeing the unattended vessels lined along the docks. Zheu blinked. "We're stealing now?" "Borrowing," he corrected dryly, already walking toward a modest trader's boat. "If it helps us stop what's coming, it's worth it." As they were about to push off, a voice rang out like a whip crack. "I thought I smelled something rotten." Tai Lung froze mid-step. Standing at the end of the dock was Tigress, her eyes locked on him with a mix of fury and disbelief. She looked as though she'd aged in battle, her posture owned, sharper than ever. "Tai Lung," she said, almost whispering the name. Then her fists clenched. Zheu opened her mouth to speak, but Tigress was already moving, fast as lightning. She struck like a hammer, knocking Zheu aside and launching at Tai Lung with the force of a cannon. Wood cracked under them as they clashed. He caught her first blow, boots sliding, eyes narrowed. He didn't strike back at first, but when she kept coming, claws bared, he met her strength for strength. They leapt between boats, the river churning beneath their feet. Tigress spun low, sweeping for his legs. He flipped overhead and sent a punch toward her ribs, only to get slashed across the cheek by her tiger claw technique. "You've gotten stronger," Tai Lung growled, wiping blood from his face. "And you're still a monster," she spat. Their fight was furious, precise, and personal, memories colliding with fists. One boat's mast cracked in half as Tai Lung slammed Tigress into it, only for her to recover midair and land with a growl. Zheu scrambled back up the dock. "Stop, please! You're going to kill each other!" But neither combatant heard her. Then, movement overhead, a whoosh of air and sudden silence as four more figures landed with practiced grace. The Furious Five had arrived. Crane hovering low, Mantis crouched and coiled, Viper coiling protectively near Zheu, and Monkey, eyes darting between Tai Lung and Tigress with barely restrained energy. "Okay," Monkey said slowly. "What did we miss?" Zheu stepped between them, waving her arms. "Wait, he's not here to fight you. We're chasing the wolves who attacked the southern villages, the ones stealing all the metal." Tigress's chest heaved. "You expect me to believe that?" Before Zheu could answer, a voice rang out behind them. "Everybody, calm down!" Po landed with a soft roll, rising with that familiar, wide-eyed determination. His voice carried not command, but conviction. He looked at Tai Lung, wary, yes, but not hostile. "What are you doing here?" Tai Lung said nothing. Zheu stepped forward again, breath short. "We think someone's forging something terrible," she said. "The wolves are supplying metal. We're tracking it, trying to stop it." The Furious Five exchanged glances. Crane whispered something to Viper. Mantis blinked and frowned. Monkey scratched his head. "That's not the worst idea." Po folded his arms, thinking, "Then maybe we work together?" Everyone stared. "What?" he said, shrugging. "Makes sense. We've been tracking the attacks too. If we team up, we'll find the source faster." Tai Lung took a step forward. His voice was iron. "I'm not working with you." Tigress nodded. "Good. Neither am I." Po sighed. "We don't have to like each other, but this is bigger than grudges, bigger than us." Tai Lung looked past him, toward the horizon, where black smoke rose faintly in the distance. "The one behind this is mine to stop. Don't get in my way." He turned, motioning for Zheu to follow, but Zheu froze. "Wait," she said. "Look." Every boat was splintered, wrecked in their battle, except for one, a barge barely large enough for all of them. Po blinked. "Huh. Guess. We're all traveling together." "Wonderful," Tai Lung muttered. "Fantastic," Tigress echoed bitterly. They all boarded in strained silence, weapons and tensions tightly packed alongside them. As the river carried them forward, the air grew heavier. Mist rolled in from the banks and the sky darkened. They were drifting into the unknown, toward fire, vengeance, and perhaps for some, the chance at redemption. The journey across the river was marked by an oppressive silence. Tai Lung stood near the edge of the boat, arms crossed, eyes locked on the churning water. Zheu sat nearby, trying to appear relaxed, but her eyes constantly flicked between him and the rest of the boat's passengers. The Furious Five sat on the opposite side, whispering among themselves while throwing the occasional cautious glance at the leopard warrior. Po stood in the middle, acting as the reluctant bridge between two worlds. It was awkward, painfully awkward. Po tried to break the ice by asking about the weather or pointing out passing scenery, but no one bit. Eventually, the tension was too much to ignore. Monkey muttered to Viper, "Can you believe we're sharing a boat with Tai Lung?" Viper's expression darkened. "I remember what he did to the Eastern Training Hall. He broke through the iron leaf chamber like it was made of paper. No one should be that strong." Mantis added quietly, "He knocked out 6 guards without even using his full strength. One of them never walked the same again, and he smiled while doing it." Crane's wings twitched as he stared at the floor. "The day he escaped from Chorgom prison, I was the first one sent to scout the area. All I found were ruins and fear. The rhino guards, some of the toughest in China, were trembling. He didn't just escape, he humiliated them." "I remember his face," Viper whispered. "Cold, empty, like there was nothing left in him except hunger for power." Monkey nodded. "He's not just dangerous, he's the reason Shifu aged a decade in a week." Tigress's amber eyes locked on Tai Lung from across the boat. Her voice was calm, but sharp. "He broke into the... Not attacking anyone," Po said softly. "Yet," Tigress shot back. "Why did you let him go back then, Po? You could have ended it. You could have ended him." Po looked down at his paws, his voice unusually solemn. "I thought about it, but something in his eyes that day told me he was already broken. Giving him mercy felt right." Tigress scoffed. "Mercy? What if that mercy costs lives? What if he's walking toward another path of destruction?" Before Po could answer, a voice cut through the silence. "You just don't understand him," Zheu said, stepping out from behind a pile of cargo. Her ears twitched and her bushy tail bristled. "Or maybe you just don't want to. Maybe he was a bad person, but not evil. There's a difference." Tigress rose to her feet, her expression tight with restrained anger. "Do you even know what he did?" Hesitated. Tigress didn't. "He broke into the Jade Palace, crippled Master Uguay's legacy, nearly destroyed the Valley of Peace. He would have killed Po if he had the chance. He was everything a warrior shouldn't be." Zheu didn't have a retort. Not immediately. Her eyes flicked over to Tai Lung, who hadn't moved during the conversation. He hadn't made a sound, but Zheu could see it. His fists clenched tighter, and for the first time, there was something haunted in his eyes. Shame, perhaps. The corsac fox stepped back and lowered her head. Then, in a sudden burst of emotion, she said, "Maybe you're right, but where were you when someone like me needed protecting? You're supposed to be heroes, guardians, but you only protect your precious villages. Not kids like me who grow up running from bandits, hiding in ditches, and stealing to live another day. If it weren't for him, I'd be dead." The words lingered like smoke in the air. Zheu turned and stormed off, back to her corner of the boat. No one followed her. Night fell. Tai Lung remained silent, staring up at the stars. The quiet lapping of waves against the boat was the only sound for a long time, until a quiet muttering drew his attention. Po sat cross-legged, murmuring to himself. He repeated a phrase softly, over and over. "Inner peace. Inner peace. Inner Ga!" The panda slapped the deck in frustration, groaning as he rubbed his forehead. "You're failing, miserably," Tai Lung muttered without turning. "How long were you standing there?" Po asked, startled. "Long enough to watch you struggle." Po sighed. "I'm trying to learn the technique from Shifu. He said inner peace helped him move mountains. Literally." "Inner peace won't fix anything," Tai Lung growled. "Not the kind of peace you're chasing. He found it." That stopped Tai Lung. His eyes narrowed. "Shifu did?" Po nodded. "Now he made peace with what happened. With you." Tai Lung didn't respond immediately. He looked up at the night sky, a dull ache rising in his chest. "I suppose he would have. You don't push it, Panda." A small laugh escaped Po. "Can't help it. It's kinda my thing." Just then, Zheu padded over and sat beside them. You're both ridiculous. One's a grumpy old tiger with a trauma complex, and the other's a giant talking dumpling who thinks smiling solves all problems. Tai Lung scowled. I do not have a trauma complex. Zheu smirked. You punched a hole in the boat deck last night because your soup was too salty. That was one time. That was 2 times. They all shared a short laugh, the first real one of the journey. Morning came. The shores of mainland China loomed in the distance. Mountains stood like sentinels over the coastline, and the mist clung to the cliffs like breath in winter air. Tai Lung's demeanor changed. His stance grew more tense, eyes sharper, focused. They were here. Tigress stepped to the front of the boat. What now? Tai Lung answered simply, we follow the trail. The wolves lead us to their master, the one behind the metal thefts. Po nodded. If it's true someone's forging weapons, we need to stop them. Don't follow me, Tai Lung growled. This is my path. I'm not here to join your little team. Po grinned. Too late. We're already a team. I will leave you behind the second you slow me down. Noted, Po said, but we're still coming. Tigress muttered under her breath, and Tai Lung caught the words, I should have finished him myself. The boat docked. They disembarked in the misty morning, a mismatched group with different motives, united by circumstance. As their boots and paws hit the rocky shore, the wind carried with it the scent of fire and steel. Somewhere beyond the cliffs, a storm was brewing. The wolves were only the beginning. Tai Lung's eyes narrowed as memories of fire and metal returned, of his past, of pain, of something darker than vengeance. Zheu walked beside him, calm yet alert. And so, the journey into the heart of darkness began.